So Lori Vallow's trial has begun, and every true crime podcaster and YouTuber is all over it. And your girl here is jumping right in on that bandwagon. And no, it's not just to chase the algorithm, but that's definitely a factor. I've had some thoughts about this case for a while. As long as this case has been in the public eye, everyone who knew her kept saying that up until she came under the spell of Chad Daybell, Lori had been the perfect mom. But I've always had my doubts about just how great of a mom she was to begin with. Let's get into it. Hi folks, and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Delaney, a true crime writer and all-around murder nerd. On this channel, I like to get into some of the worst cases, and I tend to cuss a lot. So, if that sounds like your idea of a good time, go ahead and subscribe. If not, that's cool, you do you. If you're not familiar with the Chad and Lori Daybell case, like say you've been in a medically induced coma or living in a cave without access to the outside world, girl, buckle up, because it is all kinds of fucked up. I can't even begin to scratch the surface of just how much batshittery, lies, and murder this crew has been up to. There are plenty of documentaries out there you can watch to get caught up. I recommend Sins of Our Mother on Netflix. Also, Gigi did an extremely deep dive into the case on her channel, Pretty Lies and Alibis, that I highly recommend. I'll put a link in the description. But now I want to focus on how good of a mom Lori Vallow actually was. Disclaimer, I've never met this woman, and I know a lot of what I'm going to say here will conflict with what her friends and family have said about her. But if there's one thing we can all agree on, it's that Lori is and was a self-centered, manipulative liar. I have no doubt that she acted like a loving, perfect mom around other people, but there are a few clues that this was just all an act to get attention, respect, and pity from the people around her. First, let's get into her background. Her childhood, from the little we do know, seemed a little off. For one thing, her father, Barry Cox, was one of these sovereign citizen types. Ever since the 80s, he'd been avoiding paying taxes because he thinks the IRS is illegal. He even wrote a book called How the American Public Can Dismantle the IRS, where he calls the agency, quote, a gang of self-policing liars and, quote, an evil regime. He also, of course, repeats conspiracy theories like that former President Barack Obama is anti-Christian. He self-published that book, by the way, in November 2019, around the same time Tylee and JJ were reported missing. Anyway, back in 1998, which is an interesting year for that family, as we'll get into in just a minute, he pled guilty to making false statements to the IRS to avoid paying taxes. In 2004, he and Janice were sued by the IRS again, this time for not paying $300,000 in taxes. After a few years of legal wrangling, he eventually lost his case and was forced to pay. In 2018, he was reprimanded by the state of Arizona for basically practicing law without a license. But he still published that book of his the following year. But that's not the only thing about her family that has me squinting. She had an older sister, Stacy Cox Cope, who was Melanie Boudreau Pulowski's mom. She apparently had diabetes, and in 1998, when she was only 31, she died of what was determined to be diabetic shock. There are a couple of odd things about that, but the thing that's most relevant to this video is that the rest of the family was on vacation in, where else, Hawaii, when she died. And they couldn't even be bothered to cut their vacation short to come home when they heard the news. And it gets weirder. Right after Charles's murder, Alex's first wife called the Gilbert police because she, like everyone else, felt like this had been a setup and wanted to tell investigators what she knew. Besides telling them what she had on Alex that was relevant to the shooting, she also told the police why she and Alex had divorced. Part of it was because of his wackadoo family, where she says Barry and Janice would openly discuss their sex lives right in front of their kids and everyone. Zero boundaries. Even grosser, apparently Lori and Alex who are biological siblings, had what she called an inappropriate relationship, as in, she said they would act like they were having sex, with Lori literally wrapping her legs around Alex's hips while he bounced her up and down. She said he would frequently call her hot and sexualize her, and would even grab her breasts.
Oh, hell no!
I'm thinking of doing another video just on Alex because there is a lot more down this little rabbit hole. Let me know in the comments if you'd be into that. Anyway, to be fair, just because someone comes from a super fucked up family doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad person. But it's really common for narcissism to run in families. And now I'm not a psychologist or anything. I'm just some broad with a YouTube channel and some strong opinions. But there are some things about Lori that look a lot like narcissistic traits to me. For one, she could not hold down a marriage. Now, I'm not judging her for that. Lord knows I've got enough exes in my past. But when taken with everything else, it does paint a picture. For another, she was clearly very invested in how she looked. She always had to have the perfect hair and makeup, and it's clear now that she was getting Botox on the regular. She competed in beauty pageants and even got a boob job to help her out with that. Every house she lived in had to have a dance studio covered in mirrors. You get my drift. And she always has to be the center of attention. When you listen to recordings of those little Bible study groups or whatever they were, she dominates the conversation. She has to be the most spiritually evolved or suffering the worst persecution or whatever. Which brings us to how I think Lori was as a mother. Now, I have a lot to say about this, so I'm going to try to break it down into a logical sequence, so bear with me. For one, she had no regard for her kids' well-being. For the most obvious example, Lori apparently had no issues uprooting her kids and moving them away from their schools and friends. This is extremely stressful, even traumatic for kids to go through. For a special needs kid like JJ, it was probably even worse. And when you see footage of those houses they moved to, there's no furniture or anything for the kids. But Lori sure as hell has her room full of mirrors for dancing. It's clear where her priorities were. She also seemed to choose favorites. Colby, her biological son, has nothing but good things to say about his mom, and I'm sure Lori doted on him. Narcissistic mothers tend to turn their sons into the golden child of the family. And the way Lori got jealous of Colby's wife lines up with that too. Colby has even stated that his mom basically treated him more like her boyfriend. Narcissists have no boundaries and think of their kids as basically props or extensions of themselves, and get really angry if their kid tries to go their own way with the parent no longer at the center of their lives. She even sent Tylee off on a ski trip during Colby's wedding, probably to emotionally punish him for getting married. Now, we don't know what the real relationship between Lori and Tylee was like, but we do have this one recording of all of them together in the car. Notice how Tylee isn't even acknowledged. I get the feeling that this is a good example of how Tylee was treated in general by Lori. We know that narcissists can be very selfish and manipulative with their children. For example, she divorced Joe Ryan when Tylee was very small. Tylee said that her dad had SA'd her, though there was never any evidence of that, even though Tylee was forced to undergo a forensic exam. I'm willing to bet that alone was traumatic for her. One official said it very much looked like Tylee had been coached to say what she did. Making a kid lie like that about a parent, especially a lie like that, is exceptionally callous and had to have done some serious psychological damage. Multiple sources said that after Joe Ryan died, Lori wouldn't let Tylee grieve, because in Lori's world, Joe dying was a good thing. This undoubtedly taught Tylee to suppress her emotions, because a narcissist can't deal with someone else's needs or feelings that conflict with their own. We saw Tylee do this, quickly suppress her emotions, in that video of her in the police station after Charles's murder. We'll get more into that in a minute. Which brings us to JJ. As you know, JJ was actually Charles's nephew, but he and Lori adopted him when he was very little. JJ had a lot of developmental issues, and that had to have been difficult for a narcissist like Lori. And we see in a lot of the recordings of her, the way she talks about JJ with so much spite and resentment. But it seems like earlier she had found a way to twist it to her advantage. She frequently would talk about how disabled JJ was, would call him a drug baby to anyone who would listen, and basically made him out to be a lot less functional than he really was, which was of course designed to make her out to be a selfless martyr. But as for the actual day-to-day caring for JJ, which was probably pretty challenging, it looked like she just sort of dumped that off on Tylee.
Tylee was really protective over JJ, and she was kind of like another mama to him.
Not that Tylee seemed to mind. By all accounts, she dearly loved her little brother and wanted to take care of him. There's one video where she's holding him, like in most pictures and videos of them, and insists, "He's my baby."
Taking a video of my child?
Your child?
My child.
Well, it seems really sweet. It's also troubling to me. It wasn't Tylee's job to parent JJ, and forcing a kid into a parental role is an actual thing. It's called parentification, and it's recognized as a form of child abuse. Also, if you look at that police video of her with Lori when Charles took her purse, when Lori starts getting worked up, Tylee puts her hand on her to calm her down. The way she does it looks like it's the type of thing she's done before, caretaking her own parent. In that same video, Lori tells the cop that Tylee wants to go into law enforcement.
She's going to apply to the academy. She's now a high school graduate, right? At 16.
Yeah, are you?
Yeah, well, she got her GED, so she's moving on with life.
You really want to be a police officer?
Maybe. You never know.
We'll look forward to this stuff, man.
It's clear that this was just another lie she tossed out there to butter up the cop. It's telling that Tylee kind of just goes along with it, showing that 1, she knew her mom just would sometimes lie, and 2, that she needed to go along with it. This is important. Now, it has been noted that Tylee and Charles didn't have a great relationship. Part of it was probably just normal teenager step-parent conflict, I'm sure. Also, after her experience with her father, I think Tylee knew on some level that she didn't dare get close to this new man in her life. But I also think it was purposeful. Narcissistic parents, like I said earlier, have to be the center of their kids' lives. They can't stand to see their kids get close to anyone else. I have no doubt that Lori did everything in her power to keep them apart emotionally. We now see how Lori operates. She accuses her target of doing the exact thing she's doing, tells everyone around her that the target is lying about her and attacking her somehow, and insists that everyone cut off contact with her target so as not to hear their side of the story. I'm willing to bet she played a similar game with Tylee to keep her mistrustful of Charles. This brings me to the day of Charles's murder. A lot of people think that Tylee lied for Lori. I don't think she outright lied. I think she was played. Hear me out. First, I have no doubt that Tylee learned from an early age that the only way to get her mom's love and attention was to go along with her and support her no matter what. The little lie Lori told at the police station about Tylee going into law enforcement is a perfect example. Second, Alex and Lori knew that Tylee would jump to Lori's defense. All they had to do was create a scene, and Tylee, after years of being primed to believe the worst about Charles, would immediately assume that Lori was being attacked. They also knew that she slept with a bat next to her bed. This was something she started doing during the time she was staying at her creepo Uncle Alex's house, during that time in 2018 when Lori just took off and left the kids with Charles. I think they set it up so Tylee would bring out that bat and escalate the situation. And then after they left, Lori could plant the ideas in her head so that she would corroborate their story. Remember, Lori sent Tylee to the car to watch JJ just before the actual shooting, so she didn't actually witness it. Only the contrived argument that they used to claim self-defense. I also just have to say that Lori sending Tylee back into the house to get her purse, knowing Charles had just been shot in there, shows just how fucking soulless she was. Tylee and JJ didn't stand a chance. After the shooting, everyone said Tylee was extremely depressed and crying all the time. Chad had already rated her as dark, probably because she would have been the biggest liability to their little plan. And now her grief over the man who'd been the only father figure she'd had for most of her life was harshing Lori's good vibes. Tylee was also not on board with moving to Rexburg and leaving her friends behind. I think Lori lured her up there with the promise of sending her to BYU. Not to mention the fact that she'd been there when Charles was shot. So there's that. By the time they'd moved to Rexburg, Lori was spending all her time at the temple, like it was her fucking job. And who was taking care of JJ? Tylee. I'm sure JJ was becoming even harder to handle since Lori had apparently stopped giving him his medication and ripped him out of his school. So when Tylee refused to watch JJ so that Lori could go to the temple, I think that's when she sealed her fate. We still don't know exactly what happened to her, but I don't think it was an accident that her remains were dismembered and burned, whereas JJ's were given more or less a normal burial. And remember, just a few weeks after Tylee and JJ were murdered, Lori would be on a beach in Hawaii with her new husband, smiling and laughing without a care in the world. I know a lot of this is my own speculation, so I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'm also going to get more into Chad Daybell in my next video, so let me know if you'd like me to also do a deep dive into Alex Cox as well. Till next time, Darklings. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more. You can help me make more true crime content by supporting me on Patreon, where for as little as a cup of coffee, you can get early access to videos, bonus content, and free Murder Nerd merch. The link is in the description.